Okay, then the rendering of the shadows. Our goal basically is that we have everything in place. Now we just want to clean things up, clarify things a little bit, you know. So some things I notice is these kind of darker spots in the area of the reflected light, which we don't like. We can just lift those very gently off with this kneaded eraser. Then after we lift those off, maybe we see some more of those things, or then we can take the HB again. We can just color in some of those lighter spots and see what we're left with. Here I'm paying attention to the bedbug line, so you know, if I'm working the reflected light area, I'm just toning it the surrounding tone. If I'm working in the bedbug line area, of course I'll tone it a little bit darker to match the surrounding value. The goal is to smoothen and soften things out, kind of refine it a bit further. This bedbug line is a little bit thick, so let's thin it out a little bit, very subtly. It's only these very small changes that we're working on here. This is just the very finishing touches before we call it a wrap. So maybe we can push the value in this dark spot just a little bit. You know, between the legs it's a bit of an occlusion shadow kind of area. There's not really lots going on in there. So we can just emphasize that a little bit. We can see it actually happening on the drawing as well. It kind of pushes outwards a little bit because the form is turning inward. There's less reflection. Turning form, this is also a way of kind of indicating the form in the shadows as well. So we got that going. Maybe this edge between the thigh and the back of this thigh, the right thigh, and the occlusion shadow is, you know, very distinct and sharp for us. It's because this is a little bit too light. So let's just soften that out a little bit. I want to keep things kind of soft in the shadows, especially. That's looking better. Maybe this light of the left bite cheek is kind of extending a little bit too low. It kind of looks like it has no end point. It's very subtle. We have to squint and, you know, lean back a little bit, but now we can see there is a soft end to the form of the butt cheek there, and we're happy. That was all we were gonna do to that section. I'll just clean up some of these squigglies from here a little, just to make things a little bit nicer. And yeah, working with the shadows is kind of the necessity of dot picking. There's kind of is emphasized because you're really working to just even out the tones. Because the values and the shapes should be more or less in place already from the variations of the dark stage. But you know, now I think we're also a little bit light on here. It's very easy to leave reflected lights overly light in places. It's tempting because they look so nice when they're, you know, nice and bright. It's like showing everyone, hey, I know how to draw when you put in reflected lights that are really nice. But we want to keep those subtle. Just pick out a little bit of some things from the turning tone there, so we get this kind of shape back in there, which is this kind of more pointy end to this light shape over here. Or if you want to look at it like that, then there's this sort of V shape that is created by the shadow. Okay, I think I'm all right with this sector mostly. Maybe slight dot picking can be done over here. Now I'm not literally picking dots, but currently, since I'm using the pencil, I'm just kind of coloring in these squiggly bits that the paper texture leaves. I still call that process dot picking, but it mostly comes from picking out dark dots with the kneaded eraser, which we're gonna do next over here on the back. I see a couple of small spots that are kind of distracting for me. Just want to knock those out first before I do anything else. If something, you know, feels wrong and pops out at you, it's kind of hard to notice anything else after that. So maybe just take care of those and then see what's left. And yeah, I was about to remove some tone there, but before we do anything like that, we have to ask ourselves, is it actually what we want to do? Because in this case, it's more often than not, we want to darken things in the shadows rather than lighten things. So, you know, if we have this dark area here, maybe it's that the surrounding area is actually too light rather than that area is too dark. So before you know, dot pick anything, ask yourself which direction you should be heading towards. So I don't think this area has that much variety. We kind of have this reflected light kind of thing going on here. There is a little bit of reflected light, of course, that's just physics, but we're not really seeing anything on the reference. This is basically just an even tone. There's a little bit of reflected light, but that's mostly something we could describe by darkening slightly next to the bedbug line. There is a little bit of room to be darkened here, but we don't want to go crazy because then we would have to kind of re-render things as well. So perhaps stay on the shadow side, you know. That way the transition is still intact even though you slightly darken some things. And now as you can see, you know, it works even though I darkened this. Now this is sort of the reflected light tone and it seems to be the correct value more or less. I'm just darkening this whole thing a little bit because we darkened the bedbug line and it's looking nice. And we also darken the things next to it slightly so we can maintain the contrast and the form. Maybe just, maybe just refine this area a little bit as well. There's some light squigglies in here to be colored in. Right, maybe let's go back in here and just reinforce some of the darks a little bit because now this side is a little bit darker than here. If we go a bit darker over here than here on the back, it's a bit higher above the reflected light, so it would be natural that the back is a bit darker overall because the intensity of the reflected lights is reduced a little bit over there. So we can do that. So what I'm doing here is I'm not really trying to push the value range, but I'm just kind of re-emphasizing the bedbug line. And maybe on the overall tone here, I'm just aiming for these squigglers here, so we can just make the lighter tone in this shadow area a little bit darker overall, but we don't try to really like hatch in an even layer. Just make it a bit smoother. And I'm trying not to go crazy because this is the part that takes ages if you start really coloring in all the paper texture. Just anything that sort of pops out at you. Upwards. I don't really feel we need to touch that shadow. It's looking nice, so I'll just leave it like that. Maybe just, you know, reinforce the stuff below it a little bit, you know. Create that darker shadow underneath. That's all I'm gonna do for that. Okay, final thing, I'll just look for anything I can clean up around the cast and maybe little fuzzy bits on the outline which I can grab out. So as you can see, the rendering of the shadows doesn't really take long if you kind of lay the foundation nicely. One key aspect here to learn from this graphite project is you want to really make use of the value range of graphite. So make sure you have enough contrast with the lights and darks. That way you can really work with the form you have more options in terms of tonal values to work in the lights, and you can make the shadows nice and subtle. All right, I think that's it for this one. So thanks for watching. This is a long demo, of course. I'll just see how I'll cut this up. Perhaps I'll make, you know, just a talking one and then a pure time-lapse one for you to watch.